I'll start this one by telling a story about another company which was very much removed from Calgary. Built it up very quickly, sold it for a very good price, and it's all gone now. 0 Calgary employees remaining. That to me is a failure.
Why do you care?
I live in this city.
What's been your approach to growing?
Too frugal to fail. We retained a huge amount of ownership over the business and control.
It's all organic.
No.
Are you optimistic about the future in Canada?
Yeah, absolutely.
Today's guest has helped build his business from zero to now supporting over 200 lawyers, serving thousands of businesses across Canada, and to over $10 million in annual revenue. And they're doing it all from downtown Calgary. Today, I'm speaking with Grant Lahring from Good Lawyer, and they're disrupting one of the most traditional industries in North America, law. But Grant's story transcends business success. He wants to build something so impactful that it can't be removed from Calgary. This is exactly the kind of thoughtful, community-focused entrepreneurship that Canada needs more of. Let's dive in with Grant Lahring from Good Lawyer. Grant, welcome to the Canadian Founder Spotlight Series.
Thanks for having me, Gregory. Appreciate you making the flight out.
I want to start at the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey. And when we spoke, you talked about wanting to take a big swing while you could still live off craft dinner before having a family. Can you tell me more about that mindset?
Totally. I guess in my mind, everyone should do the best they can for themselves and their community and all those things. And part of that is recognizing the unique strengths that they bring. And each stage of life has different strengths. I think when you're young, it is easier to do less lucrative work because you don't have a family or anything like that. I intentionally wanted to spend the early part of my career trying the really high risk stuff that isn't as lucrative, because I felt like that was my best opportunity in my whole career to do it.
So one thing, because I've now done a number of these founder interviews already, and something that's continuously come up is a lack of willingness for Canadians to take on risk. So if you were going to speak to a younger Canadian who's starting off their career, what advice would you give them around like taking that risk early on? If you imagine they were sitting in front of someone and you wanted to give them that advice, what would that advice look like?
There's a few ways you could phrase it, but I think one way to look at it is that your career is very long. Like if you're coming out of university now, you're 20 years old, you've got till you're 60, 40 years is a long time to work. It really is not a big risk at all to spend a few years at a startup company and see if that's something you want to do and see if you can be successful in what I would describe as a very challenging, high risk, high reward environment.
And what's that reward if for someone who does take that early risk? And we'll talk about your career path in a second. If you were going to position that the reward that you get from that, both financially, but I think more of what you learn, how would you articulate that?
I think of it as competence is the reward. You go into a small company, you learn how to do all these things that you'd never be trusted with doing, or you never have to do at a large company because they already have the processes and the answers figured out. You get to learn these things early in your career. So you come out as an effective professional who is then a highly desirable hire for the rest of your career. That kind of future-proofs you against inevitable layoffs, contractions, things like that are going to happen in your career. And it gives you a skill set that is usually more well-rounded, so you're less likely to be laid off and hopeless at 40 years old or something like that, which I think is a very unattractive consequence for people who develop really specialized skill sets right out the gate.
So you're building those skills that allow you to fast forward your career no matter where you decide to take it in the future.
I believe so. You build a skill set that protects you from change.
So now I want to shift to what inspired you to go down the path of entrepreneurship. And you mentioned that you grew up in a family business. I'd love to learn more about that. And you also spoke about how your friends from university all went on to start businesses and do great things. Can you tell me more about your family and how your family and friends inspired you? And start with your family, if you don't mind.
That's a great question. I think on the family side, my parents ran a small greenhouse out in the country. Growing up around that, I got to see that entrepreneurship let them live the kind of life they wanted to live, which uniquely, I think they optimized for having as much time together as possible. It wasn't about making as much money as possible. It really was about freedom and flexibility. And in a greenhouse business, you're seasonal. So every winter we could just hang out And that's one way to live, which they designed and they owned. And I think while I watched my friends' parents, who often made a lot more money, but were vulnerable to things like the oil patch going up and down, I saw some of the pros and cons. Moving into university, I had an entrepreneurship minor and ended up making good friends with pretty much everyone in the program. Most of them went on to make companies. Those companies, many of them failed, many of them were successful, and many of those people are actually on their second or third companies now, and they continue to inspire me and push me to do better.
Okay, amazing. I guess back to your family and the fact that they had this greenhouse business, but it wasn't necessarily about maximizing how much money came in the door. It was about having I guess you call it a balanced life. Has that impacted the way you think about your business at Good Lawyer?
Yeah, I think what it makes me think of is that I have the freedom to choose.
Yes.
That as a business leader, I have way more autonomy on what my day looks like every day than the average person. And I can use that to spend more time with the people I love, to work from home sometimes, things like that. I can travel, I can do these different things if I so choose. And just knowing you have those options on the table, I think is a definite advantage.
So another follow up on your friends. Any friends, businesses that you want to call out that are like doing really well?
Oh, totally. I mean, Derek Rucky is crushing it at Inspired Go. He used to have a company called T-Link. Stefan Radata was also at T-Link. Now he's running a property tech company called Carrot. Gosh, there's so many.
Yeah. Okay. And are these all Calgary-based businesses?
They're all Calgary companies, yeah.
Is there something about the Calgary scene specifically, and is it growing? Is there a growing group of entrepreneurs that you've witnessed since coming out of university and watching all your friends grow and start these successful businesses?
Nice. So I think a couple of things I think about when I think about Calgary and entrepreneurship. The first is just that it is a smaller market compared to your Vancouver or Toronto. And in a smaller market, there's some disadvantages. There's maybe less capital available, less examples of success to pull from. But the flip side is every company matters more. So you can get a lot of support from your community, from your network, from all those things. If you are the one person that really has an ambitious vision and wants to build something crazy, you stand out quite a bit. And we have been hugely supported by our community over the last few years. And I don't think that would have happened if we'd started the same company in Toronto or New York or something like that.
Is there like a Calgary versus everyone mentality because this is my first time in the city, but is that kind of like the vibe where it's like, hey, we're almost like you're wearing that badge on your shirt, like, hey, we're from Calgary, we're gonna build it here?
I mean, this is relevant to this month because it's an election on, but like factually, Alberta's ignored in the elections. Like it's just assumed that Alberta will go conservative. So the Conservatives don't waste any time campaigning here, and we just throw sticks at the Liberals when they show up. So like, why would they campaign here? So I definitely feel like Calgary and Alberta generally try to make as much noise as possible because we want to be recognized at the federal level. So yeah, there's a bit of a mindset that way. I think for our company, what we do, like we're all about Canada nationally and kind of uniting the country because I think we have a unique challenge in being such a big country and having cities that are very much world-class cities but are separated by immense distances. You have to really make an effort to bring people together in Canada.
Well, it took me 4.5 hours to get here, so.
4.5 hours by plane, right? Like, you know, you're in New York, you can drive to Boston in like a couple hours, right? That's a totally different thing.
And so before Good Lawyer, you were involved with several startups that didn't necessarily work out, but you learned a lot. You also worked at Uber in New Zealand, which is a super cool opportunity. But I want to talk about the beginning of Good Lawyer now. So your co-founder, Brett, saw that he was only taking home $70 of a $500 hourly rate in Big Law. My question here is, I want to understand the beginning of Good Lawyer. Tell me about that opportunity. How did Brett bring this to you, and why did you think it was such a good opportunity to build a business around?
So Brett, as you mentioned, was the one that came up with the idea. He was the one practicing as a lawyer. He saw just the outrageous amount of overhead that was being charged out, right? That's $430 an hour, which it provides the office and the support and things that a lawyer needs to function. But for a guy like Brett, who's also bringing in the work himself, that's pretty galling. And his whole premise was like, what if we did what the firm did with that 430 using software? Because then we can bring the overall cost down and still deliver the same product. In fact, the lawyer can probably take home more. So that was the original idea. He went out, met a developer who I thought he could just hire as a developer, but no, it's got to be a co-founder. So Parker Smith comes on as our CTO. They start coding together, but it turns out they can't really talk to each other. So they bring in Tom Alvarez as a product founder, and the three of them are now kind of building the software together. They're able to build an MVP. That's when I joined. So I met them at an event, actually the Harvest Builders event, which is when Neo Financial was about to launch here. They were running around giving out cards to everybody, and I was like, guys, I think we can do better using anything else. So I pitched them basically to be a client of mine. At the time, they had an MVP, nothing else really, and I joined for about a month. I was a consultant, and then we were picking up so much momentum. We had lots of positive feedback coming in, things like that. I started to feel like there was something special to Good Lawyer, that it was destined for success, and that's when I decided to make the leap and join the team full time.
Got it. And then they offered it to you because things were going so well. There's like, hey, they offered you that position?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, sweet.
And I'd totally blown the budget with my consulting.
Sure, amazing. Okay, so then how big was Good Lawyer at that point in time? Revenue, number of lawyers, customers, and how long have you been building this business now, and how big is it today?
Great question. I think in terms of revenue, it's basically zero.
Yeah.
So I can't even remember if we had revenue before I jumped on, but it was not significant. From then on, we started doubling month on month for like a year, and things started to really pick up. Obviously, where we are now, 5 years in, we're at about 10 million ARR.
So you've now grown impressively to $10 million in ARR with over 200 lawyers using your service, which is fantastic. What's been your approach to growing while raising only a limited amount of funds from angel investors? Because that's kind of a rare story, and it's one that I think other entrepreneurs need to hear.
It's a great question. I think, one, there are many ways to grow a business. I think we've seen every different path from bootstrapping to venture capital backed in our client roster. For us personally, I think we had access to accessible angel capital largely through the lawyers that are actually practicing on the platform. So we managed to raise enough money to keep things going that way. But those are kind of investors aren't the kind of people that are writing $10 million checks. So yeah, we kept it pretty lean. Brett has this saying, but I thoroughly espouse it, which is too frugal to fail. Like, we really do believe in stretching every dollar as much as we can. And you look around the fancy office and stuff, and you're like, oh, this is like terrible example of too frugal to fail. But we sublease with 2 other companies. We pay a tiny amount for this office. We apply that kind of thing to everything we do. Even stuff like our yacht party, for example, which again sounds like a ridiculously bougie, expensive event, but in fact is fully sponsored. So we don't pay a cent to run the boat party. Those are the kind of techniques we've had to do to get where we are with the capital we have. But the result of it is that we've retained a huge amount of ownership over the business and control. Considering our revenue, we're very much in control.
Okay, that's awesome. And it's very rare from my experience. But what's been the key to growth? Like, how have you been able to actually drive that growth while continuing that frugal mindset?
Growth's been interesting. I mean, we've evolved. Like, if we were a Pokemon, we would have evolved like 5 times by this point. It's been kind of stage dependent. So initially, the only people that would trust us were these really small businesses. So we went and we served mom and pop businesses. But there's, of course, not a lot of money in that. So we as we gain more trust, we move to larger businesses. We move to these scale-up companies, like your Neo Financial, your Zayzoon, that kind of thing. Going even further up the market, we now kind of serve larger in-house teams. So we work with absolutely massive, recognized logos all across the country, places like Uber and Carfax. I'm trying to think of examples I can use in marketing. Without violating marketing permissions.
Yeah.
Yes, we now do work with like Uber, MNP, Carfax, that kind of thing.
Cool. And how did you get that? It sounds like you started with small businesses, build a little traction, build some trust, and then you started. How did you get these bigger businesses in the funnel?
They started coming to us.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
It's all organic.
No, but we make enough noise in the ecosystem. We bump enough elbows. We talk to people that opportunities present themselves. And at some point, we get enough credibility to kind of unlock the next level. And people start taking those requests seriously and pushing it forward. And then you're like, okay, now we're able to work with enterprise. And then you secure a logo in the enterprise sector. And then that logo unlocks a bunch of other logos, and it just sort of catapults. So, or snowballs, I should say. And that is what we've seen over the last 5 years, is every time we move to a new level, we get a little bit of credibility, and then it starts to snowball and pick up a lot of speed.
And you have a strong vision for building something, this is your quote, big enough they can't remove it from Calgary. Can you tell me more about that, and why is that important to you?
I'll start this one by telling a story about another company which was very much removed from Calgary after it was successful, which is our friends at Tugboat Logic. So they built a successful compliance software company using a traditional SaaS model, built it up very quickly, sold it for a very good price. And it's all gone now. There's, as far as I know, 0 Calgary employees remaining at the acquiring company, which was OneTrust. So what's the point of that? Like, I feel like our community and Calgarians and Albertans and Canadians put so much support into this organization over its journey, and then it was just sort of cashed out and sucked dry and moved to the US. That to me is a failure outcome. Great for the founders, great for a bunch of people, but not a good thing for the community.
Why does that matter to you, I guess is the question, because to your point, if I was talking to another founder, they could be doing cartwheels right now and not even be considering that. Like, why is that idea of not having it ripped out of the city, why do you care?
Permanence is important to me because I live in this city and the flow of money in and out of Calgary is what affects my quality of living here. The quality of living of my neighbors, my friends, my family, all these things. And if the economy is, bringing some money into Calgary, because obviously every time we spend money on Amazon or Walmart or Uber or whatever, we're taking money out of Calgary. It starts to kind of hollow out, and then people start leaving, and you get a sort of less amazing place to live. I want to live in a beautiful place. I want my friends and family to stay here. So that's why it's important to me that tech companies take exporting seriously and take building something that lasts seriously.
So even if there was a big exit one day with Good Lawyer, you're not planning to move. You want to stay here?
No, Calgary is plan A, and the only plan is plan A.
You talked about the importance of bringing cash back to Calgary and Canada. Why does this matter to you? And do you have anything else you want to mention that relates to bringing cash back to Calgary?
From a community perspective, I don't think all companies are equal. Companies that sell things from Calgary to Calgarians, that's moving money within the community. But I think the real gold standard should be companies that sell things outside of Calgary and bring money into the community. So that's where exporting comes in. To me, it's very important that we do sell internationally and bring more money back to the city than we had to begin with, because we're constantly being hollowed out. Every time we buy something from any store, it's sending a little bit of money to Walmart, sending a bit of money to Amazon, whatever. We have to be conscious of that and address that trade flow. So if you have the opportunity with your company to export, I think you should take it because it's valuable for society.
What's your experience been on witnessing the growth in Calgary? Do you see it moving in the right direction?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, Calgary's exploding. And I think we have a unique opportunity here because we are super rich. Yeah. Like, Calgary is ridiculously wealthy on average, and the cost of living is also lower. So if Calgary can't make it work, I'd be disappointed. But I do think the resources are being put in the right places and the right companies are building up, and I think we are headed the right direction.
I guess despite the economic challenges in Canada overall, are you optimistic about the future in Canada and specifically in Calgary?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so many reasons to be optimistic for Canada. I mean, it's a huge country, lots of resources, ridiculously wealthy on the global scale. Many of our cities are like top of the most livable cities in the world. generally, I think people who get down on Canada are just people who haven't traveled enough, because it is a great place to live and it is objectively doing well. Now, that doesn't mean it goes on automatically. I think every Canadian has to make an effort to make things better in their own way, whether that's small or big. So in my case, I'm choosing to build a business and choosing to export and choosing to hire locally, that kind of thing. That's the effort that I'm making.
For businesses, what pain point are you solving, and how does Good Lawyer solve that problem better than anyone else?
So for businesses, Good Lawyer lets them access the right legal talent at the right price. By cutting out the law firm and all that overhead, the business ends up saving about 50%. The lawyer themselves actually taking home about triple. So we do get access to talent that would otherwise never be available, especially not at that price.
Okay, and is there a specific size business that Good Lawyer is really suited for?
Okay, so we serve companies kind of from 50 employees up. On the smaller side, we would serve companies like your Neo Financial or JNAP. Going larger, you get into stuff like MNP, Carfax, Uber, some of those big names.
Okay, great. And then same question for lawyers. So for lawyers, what pain points are you solving, and how does Good Lawyer solve that problem better than anyone else?
Lawyers typically have two ways they can practice. Option one, work in a big firm. These firms are very lucrative, but a lot of work. And a lot of lawyers realize after 5 to 10 years that they don't like working that volume of hours. They want to see their family, they want to raise their kids, all these things. For them, that's not a very good option. Then there's another option where they work in-house. So they work directly for a company, say TELUS or something. That can be good too, but it's a lot less lucrative. And you lose a lot of the support that you'd have in a firm and that kind of thing. Now, what we do is kind of provide a third option. So this is like a fractional engagement where you can have 3 clients, let's say. They're all interesting. You're a legal leader in those companies. You have a lot of authority and you're working on interesting subjects. And you're making a rate that is much more comparable to what a law firm lawyer would make at the same seniority, potentially a lot more, sometimes a little bit less. It's a little bit less stable, but it is a third option that a lot of lawyers find incredibly desirable.
And I guess for a lawyer that doesn't want to work for big law and they don't want to work for in-house, their other option would be like starting their own practice. But I'm assuming with Good Lawyer, they don't have to look for the leads and look for the clients.
Totally. The thing about starting your own practice that's really interesting is it's really hard. Yeah. So you want to find all your clients. Like you're going to build a big book of business up. Like that's a journey. And a lot of lawyers do want to make that journey, but a lot of others don't. So working with Good Lawyer for those lawyers means that they can access our client book and opportunities and things really at no cost to themselves. If they're the right person for that client, we'll present them.
This is more me being curious about the business model. How do you match a client with the fractional lawyer?
I mean, matching, as you've identified, is incredibly important.
Yeah.
So we put them through first the lawyers go through an incredibly long, detailed vetting process where we'll check kind of, obviously, their credentials, their insurance, their practice records, and stack up kind of their different areas of expertise. Then they'll be put into sort of a roster. When a client comes in and they're looking for a certain kind of talent, we'll review that roster. We'll find the right people for suggesting. But that comes after an intensive discovery process. They then do your interview standards like reviewing resumes, booking actual interviews with the client, and then signing a contract at the end.
Okay, love it. So my last question is, obviously you've done an amazing job growing this business. You've been able to retain a large percentage of ownership with you and the co-founders, which is awesome. You're bringing money back to the city of Calgary. But in terms of the next step, you're planning to expand to the U.S. next year. What challenges do you anticipate in that market specifically?
Going to the U.S. will be a new experience for me. I'm super excited for it. I think one thing I'm nervous about is litigation. I think they're a very lit-happy society generally. So how can we make sure that we're able to deal with all these suits proactively without spending money, because we don't want to spend a bunch of time in court if we can help it. And our competition is well equipped on the legal side. The other one I think I'm worried about is simply establishing a brand down there. So we spend a lot of time building a brand here in Canada. It's definitely our strongest asset. It means nothing in the US, so we're going to have to put a bunch of elbow grease in and make a lot of friends down there fast.
Okay, thank you for being here with me today. Thank you for starting this business. Thank you for keeping it here in Calgary and your passion for bringing money back to the economy. It's great hearing and understanding your story, and I'm very confident what you're going to do in the US and moving forward, and I'll definitely be cheering you along the way.
So that's Grant Lahring from Good Lawyer. 3 takeaways from that interview. 1, take risks while you're young. 2, be too frugal to fail. And 3, build something that brings money back to your community. And if you're a Canadian founder with a story worth telling, please reach out. I'm flying across the country telling stories like Grant's. And until next time, let's keep showing the world what Canadians can build at home.